righty. I'm going to call this special open meeting number 7 to order. I'd like to recognize that we're meeting on the traditional territory of the LHTAKO DENE. And to get things rolling, I need an approval of the agenda. So Mayor Paul, Councillor Rudenberg. That sounds a little bizarre, but thank you, Mayor Paul, for humoring us, or humoring me. Any questions or concerns or adjustments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So before we get going, I just have a few words. First of all, I'd like to thank the 3 people that have come tonight, including George. Thank you for coming. You know what? We have to temper our expectations. Finance is sometimes not very sexy or very exciting. So, but it's really important that we have engagement in this very important business of the city. And getting public feedback on our budgetary process is really important. So we're committed to trying new things to try and get citizens to come out and tell us what they think. This is an example of that. We've tried things over the years, consultations where we go out into the community. We have budget surveys. We have finance meetings every month. But we were looking for a new way to get some input, and so tonight, I don't believe we've done this before. We've had a special open meeting structured as a council meeting where we talk about only one thing, and that's the budget. Which is the reason why I'm sitting in the chair. I want to thank the mayor for humoring me to lead this meeting tonight. I'm the chair of finance, so I kind of feel like it's my baby. I want to steward this process through. So how did we get here? So this process started in September or October, where Director Bolton tasked our department heads to develop their budgets. In November and December, those budgets were submitted to Director Bolton, and she synthesized all that data and brought that to the Finance Committee in January, February. And this is where we are today, where we're looking at it. We've seen a couple iterations of the operations budget, and now we are coming to the point where we need to accept the budget, recommend the budget. And in March, that will happen. So tonight, I'm hoping I was expecting at least 20 great questions tonight, so I figure if you 4 fine gentlemen split it up 5 each, I think we're good. So as long as we're agreed on that, we're going to have a great evening. The way it's going to work tonight is Director Bolton's going to deliver a presentation which covers the broad strokes of our process and our budget. After that presentation, I'm really hoping we're going to have some questions from you fine folks. After that question period, we'll move into an official budget report from Director Bolton, where council will have an opportunity to ask questions pertaining to the budget. And you know what? I think it's going to go great. So over to you, Director Bolton.
Thank you. So as Councillor Vick mentioned, I'm just going to do a kind of a quick budget overview, just hitting the highlights. You all have a copy of the agenda package. It has a much more detailed overview of the budget if you'd like to see more details, but this is just the overview. So first of all, we like to just always start to remind you about what your taxes pay for. So one of the big things, of course, is services. So just some pictures of the various services your taxes pay for. So we have the RCMP, fire department, street sweeping. And continuing on, we've got the airport, the museum, snow clearing, of course, is an important one. And then your taxes also pay for infrastructure. So we just have some pictures of some infrastructure that's been put in. So tennis courts, volleyball court, looks like a sidewalk and road. And then some more pictures are bridges, of course, drainage projects, and street work. So just a reminder that these are all the things that we have to put a budget together for. So, and just like everyone at home, we're feeling the cost of inflation. So here's just some examples of some of the costs we're seeing. So a new full set of gear for a firefighter is $6,000. A 100-meter sidewalk costs $45,000 to replace. One decorative street light costs $15,000. A heavy snowfall costs us $50,000 per day to clear, and it takes a couple days. Each RCMP officer is $168,000. And our new fire truck that we're in the process of buying right now is $1.2 million. And about 5 years ago, when that was first put in our capital plan, it was $750,000. That's just the price escalation on the equipment that we've seen over the last few years. So as a city, we have limited options to balance our budget. The first one, of course, is we can raise taxes, we can cut services, we can delay capital projects, but this becomes a challenge for future generations as our capital gets deteriorated. We can grow the tax base, but this is a long-term strategy. So council, through the strategic plan, has to look at ways to attract investment and attract residents in order to grow the tax base. So the biggest fund for the city is our general fund, and it funds most of our services. So this is just a list of all the various services that we do. So police, victim services, fire department, bylaw, roads, traffic management, snow removal, parks, animal control, solid waste, storm, planning and development, economic development, parks and culture, and many more. So our general fund is approximately $22 million. It's funded mostly by taxation, as you can see there, but we also have licenses and fees, grants, rental revenue, investment income, grants in lieu. And then this funds our services, our debt payments, and also goes to capital for future capital that we need. I created a chart there just kind of showing the big chunks so you can see what our largest expenses are. And you can see that the RCMP alone is 22% of our general operating budget. Following behind that is Public Works, 15%. Snow is another 5%. And then I just show the breakdown of all our other costs there so you can see them. We also have other funds, such as our transit fund. This one's supported by transit fares, taxation, and a contribution from the Cariboo Regional District. We have our airport fund, which runs the airport. It's supported by airport fees, taxation, a contribution from the Cariboo Regional District. We have our solid waste fund, which is supported by garbage and landfill fees, taxation, and a contribution from the Cariboo Regional District. We have our forestry initiative fund, which is supported solely by grants at this point. We have our water and sewer funds, which are supported by utility fees and frontage taxes, which you see on your property tax invoice. And then we have our capital funds, which are supported by taxation, grants, development cost charges, and utility fees. So all those funds make up our full financial statements. So just to give you a little idea about us, so we have approximately 180 full-time equivalent employees. This does go up to almost 200 actual employees during the summer when all our seasonals are here, the summer seasonals. And we have 24 approved RCMP officers right now. That's gone up 2 in the last few years. It used to be 22. Our operating budget is $28.8 million this coming year. Our 5-year capital budget is $47.7 million. Our capital assets at the end of last year were $208 million, but this is historical cost, so that's the cost that we bought them at. So replacement value would be significantly higher than that because, of course, once again, construction costs have gone up dramatically over the last few years. Our reserves and surpluses at the end of last year, we had $28 million in reserves for future capital work. And at the end of 2022, we had $12.8 million in debt. And I'll go into some more details about our debt a little farther along. So our capital budget for this year has already been approved by council, but we have a 5-year plan. And here's some of the major projects coming up. So this year, we have a new well going in for $2.5 million. We are currently doing all the planning for the Johnson Bridge renovation. That project is approximately $11.25 million. Luckily, we do have a $6 million Strategic Priorities Fund grant towards that project. The rest is being funded by the sewer, water funds, and the Capital Reinvestment Reserve. We've got a variety of major road projects scheduled over the next 5 years, so I've just listed several of the ones that are upcoming there. But we also have some capital projects that aren't built into the budget that we do have to think about over the next few years. So one is the RCMP building renovation. Right now, that space is currently being reviewed for space requirements and options of what we can do there. And of course, we've spoken quite a bit about water treatment. Then just to give you some details on our city debt, here's the debt that we had at the end of this year. So the City Hall debt, this building we're in, $2.25 million. One of the fire trucks we bought previously, $0.4 million left to pay. Our Public Works building, $8.09 million outstanding. And our variety of equipment we buy through short-term debt, we have $1.72 million outstanding at the moment, for a total of $12.47 million. So the next slide is just an overview of the process, which Councillor Vic kind of went through, where we start out in the fall, and then we head all the way to today, where we're taking the operating budget to council and getting some more public input. And then after this, we'll have to do a 5-year financial plan, and by May 15th, we have to set our tax rates and have them approved by bylaw so that we can issue our property tax invoices. The next slide is just kind of a reminder how taxation works. So it's always a combination of assessment and tax rates, which equals your property taxes. So assessments are set by BC Assessment, which of course is independent of the city. We have no involvement in that process. And the tax rates are set by us and other taxing authorities. So the way it works with your property taxes is it really depends on how your house value changes compared to other houses. So for example, this year, the average house in Quesnel went up 2.6%. So if your house went up 2.6%, you would receive the tax increase that council sets, so whether that's 5% or whatever it is. If your assessment went up higher than the 2.6%, then you're going to get a higher property tax increase. If your assessment went lower than the 2.6%, then you're going to get a lower tax increase, and your taxes might actually decrease. So that's just a nice little chart to help understand how it all works. And you always have to remember that the property tax bill is not all from us. We are a portion of it, but there's other taxing authorities that come on the property tax invoice. So the City of Quesnel, when you get your property tax invoice, we are the municipal tax rate, the airport tax rate, the transit tax rate, and the capital reinvestment levy. And for a residential taxpayer, that's about 45% of your bill. But also on the property tax invoice will be taxes from the Caribou Regional District for North Caribou Recreation and Parks, the Regional District and the Regional Hospital, from the provincial government for school rates and BC assessment rates, and from the Municipal Finance Corporation. So then to 2024. So as Councillor Vic mentioned, the Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee has been going through the budget multiple times and has reviewed it. So the draft budget has a proposed increase of 6.6% to the total taxation collected before consideration of using surplus funds to reduce it. So this is made up of some new items that have been added to the budget. Inflation, and the fact that last year we used COVID and surplus funds to reduce the taxation increase. So whenever you use those type of funds, the next year you have to make it up and it hits you back in taxation. So that's kind of an overview of the breakdown. So the Financial Sustainability Audit Committee looked at this and decided they knew that I let them know that there will be a surplus from 2023, and they recommend to council to use $200,000 in surplus to reduce the tax increase for 2024. So this would result in a municipal tax increase of 5.6%. So that would be $64.73 for the average house, or $18.25 per 100,000, and $86.40 for 100,000 of commercial assessment. And note, this is just the municipal portion of your property tax bill. The city receives the tax rates from the other taxing authorities in April, and at that point we'll be able to give you an idea of the whole bill and how that will look. So this is kind of a breakdown for the average single-family residence. So again, I've listed the taxes that the city is responsible for. The snow reserve, this year we won't be taxing for it because we were over a little bit last year, but we're going to use some of the surplus from 2023 to fill up the reserve rather than taxing again for it. The airport, the transit, and the capital reinvestment. So here it shows the increase would be $64.73 for a house that's valued at $354,698. So in the next chart just kind of shows how we compare to other municipalities. So I've just listed some of our municipalities that are close to us and similar to us, so you can see the breakdown of how much the average house in those communities pays in taxes compared to Quesnel. One thing you have to take into consideration is that sometimes taxes are done slightly different in different locations. So for example, in Quesnel, all of our recreational things for the arena and the pool are all done by the Caribou Regional District, so they're in the other variable taxes. But a city like Prince George, they do their own recreation, so those kind of fees are within the municipal taxes. So you really have to look at the total on the far right to do a comparison. So you can see how we compare to all the other cities in our area. And that's stats that's put out by the ministry every year, so we can always see how we compare. And then the next one, I just put questions, and we can take questions, but I also just want to say we do have an email address. It's budget@quesnel.ca. So if you have any questions that aren't answered tonight and you want more details, you can send us an email and we will get back to you. So I'll turn it over to the chair.
Thank you, Director Bolton. And I just want to thank all the other directors for coming tonight to help us answer questions. And so, yeah, tell us what you think. If you have an idea or concern, you can frame it as a question. We'd be happy to take it all. Come on up.
Tell me the rules.
Oh, there's a couple rules. We need your name and your address.
I'm John Fine. I live on Permal Avenue, number 1175. And I just have a couple of questions. Thank you, Director Bolton, for that presentation. There's a couple of hot button items that have been in the press lately, provincially. Number one is the impact of debt servicing, given the increase on interest rates that the Bank of Canada has imposed. Is that having a significant impact on your budget?
At this point, it isn't, because most of our debt is locked in for 5 or 10 years. Like our Public Works building, when we took the debt on that, it was locked in for 10 years, and it won't reset till the end of 10 years. So we're still under 2% for most of our major debt, although our equipment financing for the vehicles is variable, so it has increased, so for sure. But on the other side, we're also receiving much more interest income in our reserves.
Thank you. And the other question I have is about commercial property. That's been probably more relevant in the Lower Mainland, but and you know, I don't want to give Councillor Vic a heart attack because I'm referring to large businesses, not small businesses, and there's been criticism of the BC Assessment Authority on how they arrive at assessments, and it seems to favour very large businesses and large corporations. Is that something that affects us here?
I can say that I've not heard that issue here, but I would suggest to anyone that has a concern with their assessment to contact BC Assessment. There is the opportunity to get information from them and a chance to appeal it too. But I have not heard that complaint here.
Yeah, it wasn't so much, the individual impact on residents, but overall the perception that that large corporations were benefiting at the cost of residential taxpayers. Okay, thank you.
Is that it, John? You sure? You have 3 more I need from you. Come on up, Mr. Putt.
My name is Marty Putt. I live at 1261 Picard Avenue. And it's more suggestions, and I'm not going to win popularity contest with it. Anticipated drought system. We're also looking at multi-water treatment facilities. And I see there's in the budget for another well. Has there ever been any consideration of water metering or bringing it in the future? Like I said, it's not a popularity contest I'm here for.
No, it's a good thought. Director Coben, do you want to tackle that one?
Yes, we've completed in the last couple of years a water conservation plan. So part of that plan, one of the was ways how to conserve water. So a number of the items that were considered was, water meters was actually looked at, and due to the cost of the city to produce water, among other factors such as the cost to actually install meters in homes and then read those meters and invoice accordingly, it wasn't the cost factor benefit ratio didn't work out in our favor. So a lot of the focus has been on awareness, as well as our bylaw just monitoring and making users or water wasters aware of the water and getting that out in the public, and promoting other things such as airscaping, minimal lawn watering as needed, etc.
Did you ask something about a new well there, Marty?
Well, I see on the budget, there is money
Yeah.
in there for a new well, so I mean, we're
It is in the plan,
continuing to
yeah.
use the water, but you and I both know that when the bylaw goes away, somebody decides to water the lawn or try to grow pavement, it's not very successful, but that goes on. The reason I brought it up is because right now, my sister and my mom live in Regina, and they're just putting in new water meters, and it's done by an outfit of Alberta, Neptune, they're called, and they're digital water meters, so you don't even have to access the house.
Well, I don't know if you want to comment on that. Chris.
Yeah, I can just add to the new well. So this new well replaces a couple of our real aged wells, which will be commissioned. So that's well number 3 over on Rolfe Street. That was drilled in 1959, and then well number 6, which was drilled in the early 70s over on Rolfe Street as well. So both of those wells are way past their day. They've essentially fouled off just to usage over their extended lifespan, as well as they're in the floodplain. So this well will incorporate redundancy into our system. So if we do have one of our other wells down, we have a well that we can operate, as well as it consolidates all our wells in a strategically located throughout the city, is the answer to the well question. And yeah, as far as the meters go, we are aware of like the remote monitoring, but just the cost benefit and the cost of installation is a really large cost.
And I think, Director Coleman, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but on the whole, our water situation in the community is very healthy. We have good supply, notwithstanding the manganese issue. We have good supply of water. We're not in a crisis for water production.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're well situated, being along with that's the benefits of being two rivers and a creek, is we're well for water. Along that with comes other issues, but no, we're doing well for water. This is just being proactive to maintain redundancy in our system.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to mention is unions are going to hate me for this one, but I was a union member for years. Oh, yeah, it's on. Union members are going to hate me for this, but I was a union member for years. Some of the things we have, like dealing with the water and the sidewalks and that, is there any thought of doing like an apprentice program with CNC?
Director Thomas, you want to give that one a try?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for you there, Marty. I mean, we've talked before about, and we have in the past actually done some mechanical stuff with sort of our heavy-duty mechanics, but typically, or we haven't, sort of talked about that in the last little while.
So our process normally is if we in need of a Red Seal mechanic, we solicit that employment opportunity directly.
Exactly. We just hire. We just put out a bid and already certified and trained.
Yeah. It's interesting, Marty.
Yep.
We'll write that one down for future thought.
The other one is we try to call ourselves a food hub. We have 2 pulp mills that put out excess steam. Even in the winter when it's minus 35, we still have more sunshine than most places. Has there ever been thought of putting in greenhouses, giant greenhouses? We have silviculture that's already tapping off of QRP effluent for warmth. Has there ever been any thought of putting it out there and seeing if there's somebody interested in putting in some sort of greenhouses?
Funny you should say that, because we are, City Manager, did you want to, you know where I'm going with that.
Thank you. Yes, you probably want to mention our district energy system that we're doing a feasibility study on, and that would be using waste heat energy from the Caribou Pulp facility, and it's actually the second time we've looked at district energy because we think there's so much waste energy in industry here. So we're looking at it, trying to see if it would, if there's financially feasible and technically feasible to bring that into the city. At this point in time, we're at, I think we're just starting phase 3 of the feasibility study. The first phase said, yes, technically it looks like it's feasible to bring in heat from Caribou Pulp, particularly into the downtown core where there's some of the bigger buildings, some of the institutional type buildings. That looks like there could be a positive payback to it. And of course, there's huge gains on the climate and carbon footprint issue if we use that waste energy as opposed to buildings burning fossil fuels. So we are looking at that. It's not the greenhouse, but it is definitely trying to get more value out of those that waste heat from industry.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Marty. You're next, Colleen. Hi, George.
George Henderson, Reynard Street. I have a few things. Some of the stuff we talked about, Mitch, but indulge me, I want it on the record, I guess. Bylaw. So we just increased bylaw a year or two ago, right? The way the court systems work, it's a waste, honestly. I honestly think we could go back to what we had with bylaw until the court system changes. And you and I spoke about maybe bylaw changing hours. So if most of the problems are happening when bylaw is not working anyway, it's a waste of money, in my opinion, anyway. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things in the budget is labor, right? So my suggestion would be to cut back bylaw back to where we were until the court systems change, if they ever do. And then you can always add again. RCMP, so unless I missed it,
Georgia, you want to do these one at a time? Because I'm sure Director Turner would like to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe other councillors would like to weigh in on that. That's an important question, right?
For sure, yeah.
Thank you, George. The majority of what bylaw does never goes to court, so there's not really a correlation there. The bylaw works very proactively on doing, it's changed over the years, as you know, to being a little bit more enforcement in terms of working with a vulnerable population, moving them along, et cetera, but it doesn't have anything to do with pressing charges and sending them to court. So there's not a direct correlation there with bylaw.
Okay, well, in my opinion, nothing's changed since we added the bylaw anyway, so, but if they do something like break a window or something, then RCMP deal with them and nothing happens to them. So that was kind of where I was going with that. So in the budget, the RCMP, are you budgeting for 24 police officers or 22?
We authorized the RCMP for 24, budgeting for 22, and the reason for that discrepancy or that extra 2 is in last 5 years, who knows how many years, many years, they've actually not been able to get up to even the 22 level, not close actually. So it's we call that risk managing,
yeah.
And it's a way to have some budgetary space for other priorities rather than budgeting for the entire headcount that we've requested of the RCMP.
Okay, so we're effectively budgeting for 22. That's how we get the 5.6% or whatever.
Well, it's actually 6.6.
And then using surplus.
100,000 for direct tax relief, and then 100,000 from the airport budget. They had a budget surplus, correct? So that gets us to 5.6. Yes.
Okay. The snow budget. 2013, where did we end up?
That was a long time ago, George, 2013.
But it just ended.
2023 just ended.
2023, sorry, right. Now I follow you.
Yeah. We did.
I'm thinking ahead here,
I know.
too far ahead.
We were about 5% over budget.
Okay. So right now, where's the surplus at, or where's the, what do you call it? Reserve at?
It's just slightly under 30%. I can't remember the exact number, but it's about 25%. So we like it to be at 30%. So one of the recommendations, once we have surplus available to us, is that I'll recommend council use some of surplus to top it back up to its 30%.
Okay, so this budget, does it have topping it up now?
No, it's not included.
Okay, it didn't do
Because
that.
FSAC is going to recommend that we use surplus to top it up.
Okay. Because we've had such a slow start to the snow budget, was there any thought put into gambling that we will come in under budget?
Well, I know Matt hopes that. But to answer the question, if we have an allocation for snow removal, if things conspire and we don't use that budget, that becomes a surplus next year or at the end of this budgetary year in 2024. So that surplus could be used for various things, including tax relief, including topping up reserves. But traditionally, and since I've been involved in this organization, we have never, ever just been under budget. Not that I know of.
Yeah.
Which is the whole reason why we created the reserve, because we were constantly going over budget because of these crazy snow events that require so much effort in a short amount of time, $50,000 a day worth of effort.
Yeah, well, it's changed with ice and everything, so.
Yeah. But to answer your question, if it were to come to pass that the budget that we allocate for snow removal is not used, then that becomes a surplus. And that's assuming that our reserves, the snow reserve, is already full. So, am I correct there, Director Bolton? Go ahead.
Yeah, George, with regards to the snow budget, because we have had discussions, should global warming cause temperatures to go up so we don't use it as much, then what happens? Like, there are preliminary discussions already here with regards to do that, but we're nowhere close to that yet. But the discussions have happened. What if we get no snow, right? So, yeah, we've talked about that.
Yeah, well, this year was just such an unusual year. I just thought, if you're a gambling man, it's a pretty good chance we'll be under, I think, this year, but I don't think we'd be under the next year sort of thing. So my thought was, if you wanted to take a chance, maybe you could. Right? Exactly. Yeah. Council initiatives, how much is council initiatives fund?
Currently in the reserve or budgeted for?
Budgeted for.
So in this budget is 25,000. Because there is a reserve that's got approximately 100,000 still in it from previous years. So,
Was there any? Sorry. So, is there any thought that, like when you're managing your own household, some years you just cut the fluff, right? And I would argue that we didn't do that this past year. So, what about cutting down council initiatives for a year?
That's a great point, and we did. That allocation every year was considerably more than 25,000. It was 75,000.
Yeah.
So we cut it by 2/3. But things happen in the course of a year where, for example, council initiatives was essential in helping the games, as we helped out the Hallis Lake folks with the skeet shooting. That we made a contribution to that. That came out of council initiatives. So every year we're confronted with unique situations where we dip into that. So the thought was, yes, we have a good reserve, but we didn't want to cut it entirely. So, but we cut it by 66%.
Okay. The arena's sub-regional rec, right? When you mentioned the debt, when's the arena up?
I don't know offhand. It's not our debt, yeah.
All right. And I think the last one I have, was there any thought, so I know there's a bunch of capital stuff in there, whatever, just seeking out grants throughout the year, and let's say we get a grant for something we've budgeted for, and then taking that and maybe reducing taxes at some point.
Absolutely. And in fact, we have a grant on the books right now that's not entirely subscribed to. It's called the Growing Communities Fund. Quesnel was allocated $3.2 million. We've used $1.2 million to offset the cost of our new fire truck. But the remainder of that grant is not allocated, but we are making sure we're covered off with our Johnson Bridge, which we are not covered off. The $6 million grant will go a long way, but we're still pretty far off, even with that grant and using reserves. So we have some grant funding that hasn't been allocated for that exact reason. We just don't know exactly the right opportunity, the right project to allocate that to at this time until we've flushed out the Johnson Bridge situation.
Okay, sorry, I thought of one last one. Is there anything in this budget for water treatment?
No.
Okay.
That's a $25 million project. Director Coben, am I correct on that?
Yeah.
In 2021, that was a $25 million project. So that is a unfunded liability, unfunded capital project. So we are desperate for some sort of grant assistance with that project.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, George. You met your quota for sure. And just what you were saying about the challenges law enforcement has nowadays with regards to how they're dealt with in the courts. We understand that, and that's the reality we're in right now. Difficult, though, to, in the perception of the public, with public safety, it's very difficult to, I would say it's difficult to position a cut in that enforcement when, frankly, the challenges are there and the support is in the community from those officers to remove that, even though there's challenges on the back end with charges. I can't see us cutting officers when frankly they're the sort of the last line of defense for our citizens, for public safety. But you're absolutely right. It's frustrating that there's prolific offenders that occupy so much of their time and so much of our resources that taxpayers are fronting the bill for. But the answer in cutting those officers, I think there's other ways for us to make changes in that, and that's, of course, we need help from our federal counterparts on that issue. And any other council thoughts on that, please?
So, you know, we've had this discussion too, and I've had this discussion with lots of people in the community, and one of the things that doesn't happen is you don't hear about the successes that our bylaw have, because they work with so many other community partners. It's not just the police. We're talking about other social service agencies, you know, the BIAs, et cetera. So quite often we hear about all this stuff that doesn't get, you know, to the courts, et cetera. But we don't hear about the successes that they do have. And even though they may be small, they're still successes, and we need those people on the ground. And we have to remember that it's not just about the crime piece. They also take care of, you know, other bylaw issues that are in and around the community. And the bigger the community gets, the more you need that bylaw on the ground. So I get the frustration, especially around the court system, because we're hearing it time and time again in the media. But I think our bylaw people, that's not the only thing they do. So I'd have to agree with our finance guys that it's one of those services I don't see us cutting right now.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't criticizing the bylaw, but the point is that RCMP as well, I mean, they arrest people all the time, and Crown doesn't choose to go ahead with it. So you have to ask yourself at some point, is it worth it even? The other harm reduction. Well, was there, I know, but I was told we needed, as a group, we need a certain amount.
You're doing great, George. Keep on going.
So harm reduction, again, so this is a provincial program. It was started by the BC Liberal Party. Don't say that to Kevin Falcon. It's a provincial program, and yet we're paying, I think, $75,000. That's wrong. Why not? Does council consider pushing back against the province on this?
I don't know, council. Runge, go ahead.
I think we did push back, and I think that 75,000 is actually grant funded this year. It's 75 extra?
No, the 75,000 is the cost of the clean team. What is funded through a partnering agency is the cost of the coordination of that program. So it is a partnership, and it's roughly 50-50, roughly. So, but the question stands, it's not in our jurisdiction. Mayor Paul?
Thank you, and thank you for that question, George. And it doesn't go just to bylaw. Like you were talking earlier about water purification, and really my opinion is that since the federal government enacted new regulation where they upped the threshold for manganese, which put us into the zone where we need to chlorinate, well, perhaps they should pay the $25 million because they put us into that position. And I guess it goes back to, harm reduction and what I characterize as a complex conglomeration of social and societal issues that we have inherited through no fault of our own. This is all fallout of what's happening or what has happened in Victoria and in Ottawa, but it seems like the municipalities are always the one that are left holding the bag, and it's really difficult to sort of be too hard on the government because, we're looking to the government to fund this interconnector or the Highway 97 realignment project. We're looking to government to help us out with the Johnston Bridge. So it's a real delicate balancing act that we have to walk.
So my piece on that would be, you're right, that's not in our bailiwick. Healthcare issues are not in the bailiwick of a municipality. However, it confronts us and it affects our citizens, so we feel compelled to do something about it. But that doesn't mean we stood by and accept that. We worked vigorously with Director Turner and our partners to try and help us with that program. And I would say, like I said to you, that work isn't done yet. That is a program that should be funded by our other authorities. But we made some headway this year. We're very happy that with the coordination of that program is funded by Northern Health. But there's more work to be done, obviously.
Yeah, I just want people to know we're paying for it. Thanks.
Thanks, George. Any more questions out there? Thank you. That was great. So I'll turn it over to Director Bolton to deliver her report on next on the agenda there, and that is the report 46/24 operating budget.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to seek council's input on the operating budget for 2024. So the Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee has reviewed the attached draft operating budget and the input received from the public through the yearly budget survey. The committee recommends the attached operating budget to council, including the use of $200,000 surplus to reduce taxation as outlined on page 10 of the budget overview. The draft of the operating budget has total taxation of $20,437,700 with all supplemental requests built in. This is a 5.6% total tax levy increase over 2023. The major factor affecting this budget is inflation and wage increases. Residential assessments were fairly flat in 2024, increasing only 2.6%. Revised assessments will be received in mid-March that will determine the final taxation rates that will be built into the tax rate bylaw. So I've attached the operating budget review that the Finance Committee has reviewed a couple times, and also just a summary of the input that we received through the budget survey. So this is a chance for Council to ask any questions and give any input to the operating budget.
Thank you, Director Bolton. Okay, team. Anybody else? Councillor Runge, you're first, sir.
Yeah, I didn't want to be first, but no one's raising their hand, so I'll start and I can come back at it again, all right? Page 13 or 38 of 57 on the report. Just a clarification, that transfer to solid waste, I think is like a 454% increase.
Yes, so last year, council used surplus funds from the solid waste fund to fund the solid waste fund. So this year, we didn't have that surplus available, so more taxation was required to fund solid waste.
Yeah, that's fine, but just in that percentage increase, I think currently it's showing 0. I don't think that's.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, you're right. It should be much bigger.
More important, I think, than that is page 48 of 57. Sorry, guys, I'm jumping around a little bit here towards the end. When we're talking about the other community services budget overview, my question is, all of those facilities also have income attached to it. Where would I find that income that each of them earn or potentially could earn? Because, you know, whatever we're looking at, like even if we look at the RV park, that 40,000 on first glance would look horrible, except there's income coming in from the park. But for me, it's other buildings. It's like Shirawi House. You know, what do we? You know, where's the offset from that shown in our budget, in our income for?
It's all shown in the other revenue line on page 13. So we don't break it out into rental revenue, but I believe I have sent that information to council before, and I can send it to you again if you'd like to see those rent rates.
Yes, please. And I apologize I didn't see it, and because I did request that before. So because I just think in all our other portions of our budget, we talk about what things cost and what we earn from it, and so this would just be a good way to also see, you know, where we sit, even though it does cost budgeted, we know what we get from it also. And then I guess my final question is with regards to the airport surplus. So is it true we had an airport surplus last year also?
I don't believe we did the year before.
I'm just, because the airport number I think is, you know, I don't want to fund the airport this year if we're going to take it out as a surplus next year. You know, I guess it goes back to, if we have a surplus and we have a surplus every year, like I actually would like to see it go back, and I think I've said this before, rather to the taxpayer than back to different accounts. Yes, we have to fund our accounts, but let's be clean on them forward, and any kind of surplus, I said this last year too, I'd rather go back as a lowering of taxes across the board.
So that's what the finance, so we do have a surplus this year in airport, and the Finance Committee has recommended that we use that surplus to reduce the airport taxation.
Yeah, I was looking at the airport budget for this year, and I believe, and I'd have to look, I just missed the page here right now in my head, where it looked, I thought they've have a big increase this year too. So as long as, I just don't want to see next year that we have another $100,000 surplus from the airport, budgeted in this year. I guess that's my big thing.
So sorry, if you're actually looking in the charts in this document, it's before we made the recommendation to conclude the $100,000 surplus to reduce it. So the charts are before we've made any decision with regards to surplus. So it will reduce that amount of taxation by $100,000 that's listed in that chart.
In terms of the actual increase in budget for the airport, though, that the reality on that one, Councillor Runge, is we were using COVID money to help with operations for the airport, and now those monies have been spent. So we are feeling the full impact of running the airport without the subsidy of the COVID fund. So that's why it's more of a sticker shock this year. And the same logic applies to our BC Transit. It's a sizable increase, but again, we were using COVID funding from the provincial government to offset some of the inflationary issues we've been having. And again, that fund has been depleted, so we are seeing the full effect now, unfortunately. Councillor McKelvey, I know you have a couple questions burning in there.
I guess I'll make a comment about some of the problems we're having, and, you know, there was talk about the bylaw. I personally would like to see community policing addressed or talked about at some point in the near future, as well as perhaps the city recommending that we take on Save Our Streets, which is SOS. And I think that would be a great help to our RCMP. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and I think that it's something that we could maybe sink our teeth into.
Well, from the perspective of finance, that's out of our bailiwick here, but certainly from the chair of PSP, he's standing a few doors down there. That might be something for his committee. Thank you. Mayor Paul.
Councillor McKelvey makes a very valid point, but at the same time, we have to realize that the auxiliary policing function has been dissolved, and you know, to start up a community policing program in absence of an auxiliary policing program really is, in my view, counterproductive. If I was going to lobby for anything, I'd be lobbying for a resurrection of the auxiliary policing program under the RCMP. I've kind of got to wonder where a community policing program would be administered from, whether it be from bylaw. It certainly wouldn't be under the direct direction of the RCMP, so it certainly needs a look, and I'm really looking forward to being in attendance at NCLGA and UBCM. I think that those issues are going to be top of the agenda, and I'm going to take a big fat notebook with me, because I don't have the answers, and we're all looking for answers.
Any other questions there, ladies and gentlemen? All right, Councillor Runge, round two.
Yeah, it's not towards this budget. It's actually curious towards you with regards to budget 2025. Are there any things that we should be considering already going forward that might somehow be influenced by this budget that we can be considering or thinking about? I mean, it's not, because there's nothing else I can't ask, like logging income. Does that come sometime? Do we see it on the horizon sometime? On page 20 there, where we talked about logging income from our community forest, is that, I know that's totally separate, but from a council perspective, is there any other option that we're seeing going forward, I guess, with regards to income for the city, other than just always increasing taxes?
At this point, I mean, I know we'll be looking at the landfill again just to see what we need to be doing out there. I'm not aware of us having any logging income coming in the future. We're always on the hunt for grants. We have staff constantly looking for various grants that we can find, and we're always reviewing our fees to see whether they're appropriate or not. I don't know if the city manager has any other.
Thank you, Director. No, I think you nailed it. We're looking in the areas where we can look, right? Which is the various grant funds we can look for to support the actual projects we want to get done. We're not just looking for grants willy-nilly and then saying, hey, let's go after this. We're looking for directed grants. For example, the Johnston Bridge grant, $6 million, very directed and will reduce costs for our taxpayers. With regards to logging revenues, there will be logging revenues from the community forest coming back into the community. but it's likely not through the city. It would be through their own initiatives that the community forest pursues. And again, we're still probably some time away from that, given that they haven't logged their first piece of wood yet. So some time frame. I think probably the most recent thing where council did look at something what was revenue generating was the RV park, where again, thanks to some great grant funding for that project, where the city was able to get into it for pretty low cost to our taxpayers. It is a bit of a tax generator on a piece of land that was a very challenging piece of land, just because, you know, the previous uses of that land. So we're always open for those opportunities, but they are challenging to find of new revenue sources. It's very challenging.
So my question is, I guess, when does council start to dig into, if we take some of the points from our citizens that came and spoke to us with regards to maybe selective water metering or high water usage people, are we actually charging them enough for the use of the water? You know, those types of, so that when does council look at that? It's just that, you know, because those are revenue generators, and they're not actually revenue generators, they just help keep our system going. You know, so it's just, you know, those types of things, I'd love to have a council decision sometime, or a discussion sometime on that again. And also, yeah, with all those items that we're earning, are we still, you know, so it doesn't, are we looking forward so that when the contract comes up for renewal, we're not, you know, we're not scrambling at that time, but we've thought about it already before, you know, because things change, costs change. Have our rentals kept up with it? All those types of things. Do we charge enough at the arena? Do we charge enough for different things? Those discussions that, without, you know, just keeping up with inflation. And I guess on that vein also comes the cost, you know, with regards to our public busing service, you know, and that is done by busing, the provincial one. Name slips my mind, you know, BC Transit, sorry, you know, they decide, but when can we talk about rates there too? Because that is a cost to our community that we want to have, but that we do want to look at also some cost recovery on that.
There was a few pieces there I think maybe could have a little bit of conversation. So with regards to some of the various agreements we have, we are coming up to the time where we need to renew the memorandums of understanding with the regional district for a number of services that we offer. What we always achieve for with those is to try to really get back the full cost of providing that service. So a fair split on what those costs are, so the CRD residents would pay fairly for the services that they access. So that is one thing we look at every 5 years when those get renewed. And like I say, the time is coming up when we do those. A couple other issues, the BC Transit. We do have a presentation from BC Transit in March. They are coming before council, so save your questions there about rate increases, and I'm sure they'll be all ears to those. And one thing I should have mentioned when we talked about potentially tax growth is one of the questions that will be coming forward to council very soon is a 226 tax exemption for a hotel tax. Council, that is something where there's a question in front of council of whether they're interested, and we're bringing that back in March as well. I believe that's the March 5th meeting as well. So there are some things on the horizon which can actually grow that tax base. Director Bolton's comments about how do we fund the gaps instead of just having, you know, more taxes and more service fees. It's about long-term, it's about growth. So hopefully the tax incentive program, for if council decides on a hotel tax, we'll start to move down that road. We've seen that on the housing side where there was housing incentives, what definitely boosted some of the housing development in this town, and in the long run boosts some of the tax revenues. So there's bits of good news out there. It's not that we're just saying there's no opportunities. There are opportunities to grow those revenues.
Thank you, City Manager. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. I've talked slowly and left lots of room to interrupt me here and ask questions. I'm gonna, There we go.
I've got one. Oh, I'm sorry. A question about Minerals North, and it shows that there's $80,000 in 2024. Is that the legacy that was left? Okay, thanks. I just needed clarification on that.
I got a question, Director Bolton. It's sort of off of what Councillor Runge was speaking to about the offsets or the revenue generated by some of our assets in the community. How laborious would it be to include those offsets within the cost from taxation underneath their cost?
It would be a fair amount of work. It's just, yeah, because something like the RCMP, we get traffic fines, we get rental revenue, it's all over the place. So, I mean, if we had time and spare staff to do it, it could be done, but it would be a fair amount of work to do it.
Maybe that's a very complicated example. You're right, that's a huge can of worms. But Shirawi House, we have one tenant.
Yes, rental revenue, I will send you all a spreadsheet of what our rental revenue is.
Because definitely, yeah. I agree with Councillor Runge is saying. You get a bit of sticker shock when you see the cost to the community to operate the facility. But if it was very clear underneath, oh yes, but we have an offset to cover much of that expense, that would be, it'd probably alleviate some questions. Yeah. I see no other questions. Oh, we do.
Well, okay, so it's actually not a question, but it's more of a statement, because this conversation comes up every time we do a budget. It's like, how can we get, additional funding? How can we, because of the nature of local government, we only have so many sources of money that can come in, right? We have a tax base that we rely on. And so I know that at the provincial level and also at the national level with FCM, it's one of the things that they're really working on is how we can increase that. We get 8 to 12 cents per dollar. Every tax dollar that is charged, we get 8 to 12 as local government back to us. So how can the federal government actually increase opportunities for different ways of getting money to local governments outside of taxation? Because we can't tax and tax and tax and tax for things that keep going up exponentially. So there's a lot of advocacy work that is happening at both the provincial and at the federal level to try and get those levels of government to understand that, when you're talking about increase in housing, what comes with that is an increase in costs of infrastructure. So, it doesn't help us right here and now with our budget, but just knowing that there are advocacy pieces happening and that we can be part of that voice also at some point in time, and how the tax base and tax shifting needs to work better for local governments.
Good luck.
I know. Well,
Okay, well, thank you everyone for the questions. I'm not seeing any more. I want to thank, well, I guess I'll just follow the agenda, shouldn't I? So there's no more questions. There's no more changes to upcoming meeting schedule. I am not aware of any changes to the committee appointments. And are there any announcements for future events? Mayor Paul.
Thank you. I just want to mention that I've taken it upon myself to establish a city team called the Taxes Outlaws, and how appropriate is a name like that at a meeting like tonight, in support of the epilepsy Quesnel program for awareness and fundraising. And what I've done is I've circulated for council an order sheet where on or before March 8th, you can order a scrumptious lunch for epilepsy, and it'll be put up by Quesnel Bakery. and it's $16. And so I'm just encouraging council to do one or more of the following. One would be order lunch, or simply make a contribution to our Taxes Outlaw pledge form that I will be handing in to the epilepsy cause. And I guess number 3 would be to encourage friends, family, colleagues, etc., to do the same thing. And I'll be doing another reminder of this at our March 5th meeting, just in time of the March 8th deadline for ordering up the lunches. I do this because it is a good cause, but this has been orchestrated by Natasha Wasmuth, and if you know Natasha, you know that she is passionate about this whole cause, and she's a real motivator, and she's motivated me to action, and so I'd appreciate council's support on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. Councillor Rudenberg.
Well, I'm actually surprised Mayor Paul didn't mention this about the event that just finished on Sunday. 1,300 plus volunteers in the community put on an outstanding LHTAKO Quesnel BC Winter Games. I've heard nothing but kudos from all the kids and parents that visited and their coaches, etc. The amount of logistic work that had to happen between food and transportation, opening ceremonies, getting the kids to and from their events was just amazing to watch happen. And so kudos to everyone, for all those who volunteered, for those who watched online when they could, those who attended events. It really showcased what Quesnel is about. And I know the mayor has said this several times, that I think it's reignited volunteerism in the community. I hope it follows through after, long after the games are gone. So kudos to Quesnel for a great set of games.
Well said, Councillor. Any other announcements out there? Okay, seeing none. Gallery questions. This is your last chance. No questions, thank you. And the last word is thank you for coming tonight. Much appreciate your feedback, your questions, your participation. Thanks to George, great participation tonight, sir. You're setting a new standard, I see. Oh, we have one question. Okay, come on up. So, Colleen, I need your name and your address.
Okay. Good evening, I'm Colleen Gauthier. My address is 760 Kinchant Street, so very close by. Just with the winter games and things like this, and you're talking about taxation from other forms, I just wonder sometimes, how are we marketing Quesnel to the outside communities? Like, do they have a delegation that goes, or is there things that, like an expo, I don't know, for showcasing your town to encourage developers to come or people to move here, or things like this? Like, is there such a thing? And if not, could it be part of a budget? Because I notice there's no marketing, shall we say, and I know it's another expense, but it could be a valuable expense, because to encourage, especially developers, we're talking housing and businesses, and we boast about our taxation here, and you could see, that we are less than some others. Like, how are we getting the word out to come to Quesnel, to other communities, other places in BC, and even across Canada, to other provinces?
Well, Colleen, we definitely have our economic development team that does exactly things that you've just described. It's very pinpointed efforts. We have items in the budget this year for promoting our new RV park that we built last year. Mm-hmm. We also have some budget there for our new skills, bicycle skills area that we built at our rec center, and our pump track, which is a little further up the hill. So we do pinpoint effort for sure. But broadly speaking, I don't know if City Manager, you want to broadly speak about how we represent our community to developers and whatnot? I'm not sure the answer to that one.
That's a really great question that I'm not really prepared to answer. I know, as council is all familiar with, our rebranding exercise that this city council went through during the last term of council. That was very keenly developed with an eye towards marketing to the outside world, and that has been successful, and we see that branding everywhere, and we see lots of the other agencies in town have picked up elements to include in their own branding, such as the school district has with their new logo. So the branding was one thing that we did work on. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, our Economic Development Department is regularly looking for opportunities. So looking for opportunities to put the word out about Quesnel, working with the tourism folks. We just recently had a presentation from the CCCTA about their activities and how they're marketing in this area in addition to the rest of the Cariboo Coast Chilcotin. But they are doing that marketing, so the word is getting out there. Do we have specific big projects in our budget for this year for marketing? I don't think so. We don't have nothing large that's in front of us, but it's something we continually work on. One of the initiatives that we decided we would work on for this coming year is to try to be more inclusive with Barkerville and Wells, as far as trying to make sure that we do some more collective type advertisements, so people going to Barkerville would say, hey, let's go to Quesnel, or afterwards go to Quesnel, and vice versa. So there's a number of activities happening, but again, nothing that's, on a grand scale at this point.
Mayor Paul.
Yeah, thank you. And further to that, when you look back at BC Winter Games that we just hosted, as I'm the mayor walking around, I could not believe the compliments that we received, and particularly from people in the more urban areas of the greater Vancouver area, in how, to them, the Winter Games has really shown how this is such a caring, giving community, and our guests were overwhelmed with that. In fact, I heard a couple of people say, gee, I wish I could live here. Well, you can live here, and we got probably the most reasonable real estate prices anywhere. And that extends beyond the Winter Games to, we promote and help. We don't give any grant money, but we certainly make it as comfortable as possible for Billy Barker Days, for the Prospectors Show and Shine, which is a real popular event. We've got the minor hockey provincial championships coming up here in Quesnel in the next few weeks. And I think that it's events and programs like that really make Quesnel shine. And I mean, you can go out and buy all the expensive, glitzy tourism advertising that you want, but I think that, when we're really focusing on events, and as the city manager says that, we're partnering with Barkerville and sort of piggybacking on each other, I think that that's the real key to success. And one thing that wasn't mentioned is through our Economic Development Department, we have Tourism Quesnel, and if you go into Tourism Quesnel, I mean, we've got an events list there that's changing all the time. In fact, we had the dog sled races on 2 weekends. It only happened on once, but we were so excited that we had it listed twice. That's a sort of an inside joke. But if you go into the Tourism Quesnel events calendar, you're absolutely amazed at the number of events that are happening. We've got one of the best farmers markets in all of British Columbia. It's that kind of stuff that really sells Quesnel.
I'd also like to add, actually, with events, because I'm very involved with the Arts Council. Mm-hmm. I would love for Quesnel to start getting more involved with the arts, because that, too, has got a number of events, but it's hosting. We do not have the venues for many of these, and we've got so many talented individuals of all ages here in Quesnel. And I know it's been brought up over the years. Bernice Heinzelman, it was one of her steady fights for some kind of Performing Arts Centre, but just like you said, diversity of events, definitely bring people to Quesnel, and showcasing the talent in this town besides the outdoor events happening and things like this, but also, as I said, I do feel our arts are being neglected by the city for highlighting and more exposure and recognition of the many forms of arts that are happening. So, yeah.
Well, thanks for that, Colleen.
Yeah.
The one comment that you made earlier in your question was attracting the attention of developers. And I know Director Turner works closely with proponents who come to the community kicking tires, so to speak. I guess the question to Director Turner is, do you think there would be anything to gain by the city representing itself at these events where developers would gather and be looking for opportunities?
Thank you. Just to go back a little bit, we have done a couple of initiatives to directly hire people that their main job was to go out and speak to developers across the province and outside. We have exactly one project right now being built up beside Frank's Supermarket there, a 20-unit that was the direct result of that work. There's actually a number of other developments on the books right now, including a 57-unit apartment you're going to see being built any day now, right next to City Hall. There is a number of projects that we are partnering with our provincial partners as well that are a result of those conversations and those works that we've put in place.
Thanks for the question, Colleen. Are there any other questions from the gallery? I don't see anybody. I just want to thank you for members of the community who've come out tonight. I want to thank staff very much for coming out and humoring the questions and reviewing council's feedback and questions. And thank you on behalf of FSAC for hosting this very special meeting. I hope everyone found it productive. Anyway, I'll ask for an adjournment. Councillor Runge, Mayor Paul, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.